My name is Abigail. I am 36 years old, and up until that moment, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was losing my job at the marketing firm 2 years back. But what happened next made that feel like a stubbed toe compared to a bullet wound. It was a Thursday morning. I remember because Thursdays were the days I usually paid bills. I logged into my bank account with a cup of coffee in hand, prepared for the usual routine of watching my hard-earned savings trickle out toward rent and utilities. But the screen froze. Then a number appeared. Not hundreds, not thousands, hundreds of thousands. Negative. First, I thought it was some kind of glitch. I blinked at the screen, rubbed my eyes like some cartoon character, waiting for the numbers to make sense. But they didn't. My stomach dropped when I saw the red letters at the bottom. Outstanding loan balance, $187,000. I nearly dropped my coffee. My first thought was identity theft. Some stranger had hacked my information. Maybe a scam. But then I scrolled down to the loan documents. And that's when my world stopped. There was my full name, my social security number, my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. The handwriting was wrong. Floppier. Angled in a way I would never write. And the contact information. A phone number I recognized immediately. My younger brother's. Ethan. I whispered his name out loud. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was going to break through my chest. I tried to tell myself it was impossible, that maybe I was mistaken. But then another detail caught me. The listed address for correspondence. It wasn't mine. It was his apartment across town. That's when the air felt like it had been sucked out of the room. My own brother, the kid I had carried on my shoulders when he was 5, the man I'd vouched for a dozen times when he couldn't hold a job, the person who was supposed to have my back, had stolen my identity and dragged me into nearly $200,000 of debt. The phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I knew before I picked it up who it was. "Mrs. Abigail," a stern voice said when I answered. "This is Collections with Capital Union Bank. We're calling regarding the outstanding loan under your name. We need to set up a payment arrangement immediately to avoid further legal action." I couldn't breathe. My voice cracked. That loan, that wasn't me. There was silence on the other end before the man said coldly, "Ma, the documents have your signature. If you believe this is fraud, you'll need to provide proof. But until then, you are responsible." I hung up before he finished. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my temples. How could Ethan do this? Why me? And worse, what was I going to do now? Because the bank didn't care about brotherly betrayal. They wanted their money. And unless I could find a way to fix this, I was the one who would lose everything. My credit, my home, even my freedom. But Ethan didn't know one thing. He didn't know what I was capable of when pushed to the edge. And soon he was going to find out. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. I wasn't always angry at Ethan. In fact, for most of my life I defended him. He was my younger brother by 6 years, the kid I protected when bullies chased him home from school, the one I let tag along even when my friends complained. Our parents used to joke that Ethan didn't need a guardian angel. He had me. But here's the thing about being someone's shield your whole life. Eventually, you forget to protect yourself. Ethan was always different from me. Where I was cautious, he was reckless. Where I saved, he spent. Where I studied, he cut corners. But he had this charm, this way of talking himself out of any trouble, that somehow always won our parents over. I remember one night when we were teenagers. Mom had found a broken vase in the living room. Ethan swore up and down it wasn't him. He even managed to get her to believe that maybe the cat had knocked it over. I knew the truth. He'd been tossing a football inside the house, ignoring my warnings. When Mom left the room, he shot me that grin. That grin that said, "You won't tell, right?" And I didn't. I never did. That was the first crack. As adults, the cracks widened. Ethan bounced from job to job. Bartender, car salesman, even a stint as a business consultant, which was just a fancy name for giving advice he had no credentials to give. He borrowed money from me more times than I could count. "Just until next week, Abigail," he'd say. Except next week turned into months, and the money never came back. One Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago sticks out in my memory like a bruise. The table was full: turkey, stuffing, pumpkin pie. Dad raised a glass and started talking about responsibility. "Abigail's doing well," he said proudly, nodding at me. "Stable job, good head on her shoulders. Ethan. Well, Ethan will figure it out someday." Ethan's jaw tightened, and his eyes flicked to me, cold and sharp. Later that night, as I was washing dishes, he cornered me in the kitchen. "You love that, don't you?" he hissed. "Being the golden girl. Watching them look at me like I'm some kind of failure." Froze, dish in hand. "Ethan, that's not what I—" "Save it," he spat, storming out. That was the first time I realized just how much he resented me. Still, I never imagined he'd do something like this. Stealing my identity wasn't a prank, or a lie to cover a broken vase. This was a deliberate choice. A choice that could ruin my entire life. The weight of it crushed me as I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at the loan documents I'd printed out. His name wasn't on them anywhere. To the bank, Ethan didn't exist. To the bank, I was the liar. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not just the betrayal, but the fact that he thought I would take it. That I'd roll over like I always did. That he counted on me protecting him again, just like when we were kids. But not this time. Because when I looked at the mess he left me in, lawsuits, collectors, a mountain of debt, I realized something. If Ethan wanted to play with my life, then I'd show him what it felt like when someone played back. And the first step. I needed to look my brother in the eye and hear him admit what he did. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The next morning, I drove across town to Ethan's apartment. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I'd barely slept, replaying the words from the bank officer over and over in my head. Fraud. Repossession. All tied to my name because of him. When I pulled into the cracked parking lot, Ethan's beat-up sedan sat crookedly in its space, as if even his car had given up on following rules. I marched up the narrow stairwell, heart pounding, and knocked on his door. "Coming!" His voice called lazily from inside. When he opened it, he looked the same as always. Messy hair, that easy smirk, a half-empty coffee mug in his hand. As if he hadn't detonated a bomb under my life just days ago. "Abigail," he said, sounding surprised. "What brings you here?" I held up the folder of loan papers, my voice shaking with fury. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly why I'm here." For a split second, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He leaned casually against the doorframe. "I don't know what you're talking about." My blood boiled. I shoved the papers at his chest. "The loan, Ethan. $200,000. Name. My social security number. My life. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" He glanced down at the documents, then chuckled. "Relax, big sister. Just money. I'll pay it back. Just money." Snap. "Do you have any idea what this means for me? My credit is destroyed. Collectors are calling me. I could lose my house, my job, everything because of you." His smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "You've always had it easy, Abigail. Perfect job, perfect house, perfect reputation. I needed a break. I just borrowed your shine for a while." The words hit me like a slap. Borrowed my shine. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even ashamed. I stepped closer, lowering my voice, each word sharp as glass. "You didn't borrow, Ethan. You stole. And you lied. Me. To the bank. To everyone. His eyes darkened, and for the first time his voice hardened. What was I supposed to do? You think I like being the screw-up brother? You think I don't notice the way Mom and Dad look at me? The way you look at me? I needed to prove I could make it too. I stared at him, stunned. So, you proved it by destroying me? We stood there in silence, the air between us heavy with years of resentment finally breaking loose. I realized then that Ethan hadn't just taken my name. He'd taken every ounce of trust I'd ever had in him. When I finally turned to leave, he called after me. Don't bother trying to fight it, Abigail. The money's already gone. You'll only make things worse. His voice followed me down the stairs like poison. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt toward my brother before. Hate. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel, numb. The betrayal wasn't just real, it was complete. Ethan had chosen himself over me, over family, over everything. And he didn't care. But as the anger hardened inside me, a new thought began to take shape. If Ethan wanted to gamble with my life, fine. But he had no idea what I was capable of when pushed to the edge. Because I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was going to make sure the bank saw the truth. And that Ethan finally faced the consequences he'd been dodging his whole life. And what I planned next. Even Ethan wouldn't see it coming. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. The revenge plan begins now. I drove home from Ethan's place with my heart hammering in my chest. His words echoing like a drumbeat in my skull. Don't bother trying to fight it, Abigail. The money's already gone. He thought he was untouchable. He thought I would just roll over, take the debt, and let him live freely on the ashes of my name. But he underestimated me. That night, I spread the loan papers across my kitchen table, every page taunting me with his signature forged as mine. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly, the only sound in the silence of my empty house. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands trembled so much the rim clinked against my teeth. This wasn't just betrayal. This was identity theft, fraud. And for the first time I thought about those words not as abstract legal terms, but as weapons I could use. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. Loan terms, federal statutes, penalties for fraud. With each click, each paragraph, a small flicker of hope pushed back against the despair. Ethan hadn't just left me in debt. He'd left a trail, and trails could be followed. Over the next week I became obsessed. I took time off work, claiming illness. I drove to the bank and requested every single document they had on the loan. I spent hours with my own credit reports, tracing transactions that weren't mine. And slowly, painfully, I pieced together a timeline of Ethan's crime. I found receipts for luxury electronics, rental cars, even a 3-day stay at a resort in Florida, all under my name. My stomach churned each time I saw the amounts. Thousands upon thousands of dollars gone. But then I found the key, an account number. One the bank officer had overlooked when showing me the loan file. It wasn't mine, it was Ethan's. My brother hadn't been as careful as he thought. I stared at that number, my pulse quickening. This was it. The link that tied everything back to him. The temptation to confront him again nearly consumed me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Anger wouldn't save me. Precision would. So I built a plan. Step 1. Gather evidence. Not just enough to convince myself, but enough to convince the bank, the police, even a judge if it came to that. I scanned documents, took photos, created a digital folder that painted a damning picture of Ethan's scheme. Step 2. Protect myself. I froze my credit, called the bureaus, flagged my accounts. The collectors still called daily, their voices harsh and unyielding, but now I could answer them with something other than fear. Step 3. Deliver the truth, not to Ethan, but to the very people he thought he had fooled. Late one night, while the rest of the city slept, I sat at my desk drafting an email to the bank's fraud department. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I wrote the subject line. Urgent. Loan fraud and identity theft. Evidence attached. When I finally pressed send, my chest rose and fell with something close to relief. But relief wasn't enough. I wanted justice. I wanted Ethan to open his door one day and see the same fear he'd planted in me staring back at him. The next morning I got a call. It was the bank investigator, her voice crisp and serious. Mrs. Abigail, we've reviewed your documents. This is significant. We'll be in touch very soon. For the first time in weeks I felt like maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning. But even as I hung up, I knew this was only the beginning. Ethan thought he was clever, but he had no idea that every lie he told was about to unravel. And when the truth arrived at his door, it wouldn't come quietly. Because I wasn't just going to save myself. I was going to bring him down. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. The payback is about to explode. The call came 2 weeks later, just as I was stepping out of the shower. My phone buzzed on the sink, and when I saw the bank's number flash across the screen, my stomach tightened. Mrs. Abigail. The voice was calm but purposeful. This is Investigator Mills. We've completed our review. We'll be proceeding with action against your brother. Law enforcement has been notified. You won't be held liable for the debt. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks, the shame, the dread, the endless pounding of collectors at my door, lifted in an instant. But more than relief, there was fire in my chest. Because I knew exactly what law enforcement has been notified meant. And so did Ethan. 3 days later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. It was a neighbor of his, voice shaking with excitement. Abigail, you won't believe this. The cops are outside Ethan's place. They've got papers, looks like a warrant. He's yelling, but they're not listening. I didn't rush over. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat by my front window, staring at the world outside, my coffee cooling on the table. I imagined the scene. Ethan's smug grin wiped clean. The arrogance drained from his eyes as officers handed him documents stamped with the truth he couldn't outrun. The same truth he had tried to bury me under. That evening he called me. His voice shaking, desperate, no longer the confident manipulator. Abigail, listen, please. I didn't mean for it to get this far. Just help me. You can talk to them. You can fix this. I let his words hang in the air, each one dripping with the irony of the situation. Me fix this. That had been my entire life. Cleaning up Ethan's messes, smoothing over his lies. But not this time. Ethan, I said, my voice steady. You signed my name to debts you knew I couldn't pay. You used my life like it was disposable. This is yours to carry now. Not mine. And then I hung up. The silence after was heavy but satisfying. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like Ethan's shadow. Felt like myself again. The bank cleared my record. The collectors stopped calling. Slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt the life he had tried to ruin. But here's the part no one tells you. Revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's the sound of your phone not ringing with demands you never agreed to. Sometimes it's the weight off your shoulders when you finally know justice has been done. Months later, I passed Ethan's old house. The lawn was overgrown, the windows dark. He'd moved in with a friend after losing nearly everything. I stood there for a moment, staring at that crumbling facade, and I realized something important. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. In the end, Ethan thought he had beaten me, thought he could live off my name, leave me drowning while he thrived. But he forgot one thing. Truth always has a way of knocking on the right door. And when it finally did, it wasn't mine. It was his. Watching him face the consequences wasn't just satisfying. It was freedom. Freedom from years of being the sister he thought he could manipulate. Freedom from the chains of his lies. And me. I'm still standing. Stronger than ever. So, if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or used, remember this: the quiet ones don't forget. And when we rise with proof, with power, and with a plan. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If it struck a chord, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because more stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption are on the way. And trust me, the next one will leave you speechless.